I'm Victoria, and this is Chaos, Clarity, and Confidence. If you're navigating midlife feeling like you've lost yourself somewhere between the hormones, the hustle, and the who am I anyway, you are in the right place. Here we talk about what's really going on. Nervous system stuff, chaos stuff, hormone stuff, healing old stories kind of stuff. Finding your way back to you without the pressure to have it all figured out. So take a deep breath, maybe pour a cup of tea, and let's have the kind of conversation your soul has been craving. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Chaos, Clarity, and Confidence, Finding You Again. This is your podcast if you're in midlife wondering, what is going on and I need somebody to talk to. Today's guest is someone whose words truly feel like soul medicine. Today we have Michelle on, and she is a woman who knows what it means to lose yourself and then slowly, bravely find your way home again. Her story isn't just about surviving midlife, it's about rising from it. She's here to share the powerful inner work that helped her reclaim her voice, her confidence, and her sense of self after years of being lost in roles, relationships, and expectations. Michelle is a spiritual mentor and host of the Soul Loom podcast. Did I say that right? Soul Loom podcast. Yeah, and author of Embrace Spirituality and Enhance Your Human Experience. She supports midlife women who feel emotionally disconnected or energetically depleted to reconnect to their voice, their clarity, and their inner strength. Through astrology, human design, and soul-led guidance, which I am so glad you're here today. I am just learning about human design and I have so many questions. But back to the intro. Michelle helps women come home to themselves through her sacred remembrance sessions. So Michelle, like I said, I am really excited to have you here today.
Thanks,
I'm
Victoria.
just digging into human design, but I would love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did this all roll out? Give us your backstory.
Well, my backstory is from a spiritual perspective. I have been what I call a practicing spiritualist all my life.
Okay.
So when I was a very sort of young teenager,
Mm-hmm.
my father actually was an energy healer, and he got into spiritualism through a health crisis that he had,
Mm-hmm.
because that was back in the very early 1980s, where all of this was not everyday conversation, and you
Mm-mm.
didn't just find you know, alternative therapist on every corner store.
No.
And through seeking out alternative therapies to manage, he had very bad migraines and very bad neck problems.
Mm.
He kind of started to deep dive into this whole space. And then that evolved into him doing energy healing, which evolved into him meeting with lots of mediums and other healers and all sorts of people in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of introduced to it through that. So it's been a part of my belief system for as long as I can remember.
Mm.
Um, so it's always been there. So, as life then took over and you become an adult and you start to enjoy all those wonderful things that adulting brings to you,
Yes. Overrated
you know,
things, I
all
will
those
say.
all those fun things that we all, can't wait to grow up to experience.
Yeah.
Um, I, in my mid-20s, I then got into my what I thought would be my life partnership.
Mm.
And that was the event that I think led me into that invisibility feeling.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So you're in your mid 20s. I think so many of us in that kind of time frame, we have this vision of how the life is going to be amazing. It's all going to roll out. And then, we kind of hit our midlife or our 30s, 40s area, and things aren't exactly what we had envisioned in our 20s. So for you, how did that unfold for you? What was that like?
I think, like everybody, as you said, I think, you meet your person and you think that that is going to be your future self.
Mm-hmm.
And it fits all of those sort of picture book type expectations that we have, I think, especially as women.
Yeah.
And I was in this relationship for 27 years. It was emotionally not, it was not a healthy relationship, emotionally, physically. And that was something that escalated over time. But I think you lose yourself so easily. And I think it happens over a long stretch of time. I think anybody who's in any form of long-term anything,
Yeah.
and I often like to say that this isn't always a relationship space. Often women can be in amazing relationships, but they can be in really terrible workplace situations.
Yes. Yeah.
Or caring situations for parents or others, or it could be any context.
Yeah.
And I think you manage it differently when you're young, because it's all still new and wonderful. And then maybe you become, as I did, you start having children, and then that adds another layer into what you're managing. And then as your children get to a certain age, you then sort of go back into the workforce. So then you're adding another layer. And then it all just becomes very noisy. And I think when you get to midlife, which for me was probably my late 30s, because I had my last son at 37, when you're getting into that 40-something age and your children are at a certain age, you do start to second guess yourself. And I don't think that's unusual for any of us.
No.
But there's also a lot of universal factors that kick in there, because you've got all of the energies at play that are directing your life path, which you already chose before you arrived here. And I think the reason why we get to that midlife stage is because we're going in and out of things like your Saturn returns and your progressed moons and all of those different energetic phases that flow in and out of your life experience. They start to talk to you internally, and a lot of people don't understand what that talk is, but that's what starts you feeling a bit sort of unnerved,
right?
Because deep down inside you're starting to second guess your purpose, I suppose, depending on what that is. And I think that's why at midlife, as well as all the normal changes that occur to you hormonally as a woman, you end up in this kind of headspace of, what am I doing? Why am I here? I don't even remember anymore.
Yeah, I think we should dig into that a little bit, because I have talked to so many women in my programs and in my coaching that that's where they're at. They're at that space of, this doesn't feel right. I don't know what's going on. I feel like they're shifting. I had a really great conversation the other day with a client that she was saying that she almost felt guilty that she was second guessing things. And, I think, like you're saying, energetically, we've decided our soul contract long before we even arrived here. So there's things at play that we may not understand. So from your perspective, and the energetics that with human design and all the Saturn returns, because I know there's going to be a lot of people. I do a lot of like nerdy stuff on here too, so I know there's going to be a lot of people like, we need to dig into this. Can she talk more? So help us understand that. What does that mean? What is that doing to us? What is this whole, our human design is telling us, well, it's time to do this now, and our human side is going, oh, but shouldn't I just be happy that I have this amazing life right here? Why am I second guessing it, right? So dig in with us. I would love to hear more.
When I'm working with someone who comes to me, and more often than not, they are midlife women, and I think you always end up supporting someone who has lived a very similar life story to yourself. I just think that's the way the pattern works. You often will hear your own story in the people that you're working with.
Yeah.
The very first thing that I will do before I even really speak to a client about what is your actual situation happening is I look at their natal chart information, because that natal chart is actually the blueprint of what your energy for this life experience is going to be. You chose that time and place, And a lot of people will go, oh, but, I was a cesarean or my mother was induced. It doesn't matter. All of that was pre-chosen. Nothing's random.
Yeah.
So, you were born when you wanted to be born, regardless of the humanness of the experience.
Yeah.
So your natal chart gives you so much information. And it, like through the north and south node, it lets you know what experiences you're bringing in from other life experiences. So that allows you to understand why you tend to keep gravitating back to those repeating patterns, because that's the repeating pattern. You still haven't healed from your previous. And your north node tells you, well, this is where you want to lean this time. So this is where you need to go. So you need to get out of that, oh my God, why is this all happening to me sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I also, when I learned astrology, the most fascinating part of it was actually the progressed moon. And I had no idea until I learned about it that the moon progressed through your life. So as our moon progresses normally through the month, and you have the various 8 phases and what each of those means, that, there's release, there's new beginnings, there's growth, and then there's the full moon. The same cycle happens across your life every 29 and a half years.
Oh, wow.
I know.
I did not know that. That's new.
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't know it either. And when you can look at what your progressed moon is, and you work out what moon you were born under, and then you just simply progress the phases every 3.5 years across each 29 and a half year cycle.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you can see your life aligning to that energy. And when I learned mine, I was actually in my balsamic stage, which is the stage you have just before your full moon, your new moon. And when I was in my new moon, when I learnt about it, and when I actually then reflected back to what the 3.5 years were like prior to the new moon, I had left my partnership of 27 years. I had changed jobs a couple of times in the 3.5 year period of that balsamic moon. I had moved out of my family home. I had moved into a rental, which I hadn't done since I was in my teens. And it was a true period of release. I was letting so much go. And the energy of that 3.5 year phase was, and I'll say forcing for the want of a better word, because the energy keeps pushing at you. And you are in that feeling of, this isn't working, this isn't right.
Yes. Yeah.
And you do find that things will just disappear. And then as I came into my new moon, which was allowing myself to then start to plant the seeds of my new 29 and a half year phase.
Yeah.
Because I was born under a new moon. So that was the beginning of my next 30-year cycle.
Okay.
Is where I then settled the relationship financially. I bought the home I now live in. I started to plant those seeds of being me, the new person, for the next X amount of years. And I also lost my mum at the end of that first year of my new moon. So there was the last bit of release around losing a parent, but then there was the financial gain of an inheritance, which again was part of that seed planting and that ability to now be supported through that new moon phase, of which I'm now almost coming out of and heading into the next phase. So you have all of that energy at play. And then, yes, you have your human design, which is a very new thing for me, but I love working with it. And your human design also works off your natal chart information. So it's when and where you were born, but it's the energy of how you actually do life. So once you know whether you're a projector or a generator or whatever category you fall into, and you understand the characteristics around how you should approach life, it then can make you understand how you may need to change your language or how you may need to change the way you approach situations, because you're pushing against the energy which naturally isn't yours. So when I say that you have all those energies at play, so many people, because it's been lost over the eons of time,
Mm-hmm.
no longer understand these concepts, and they don't find out about these concepts. They don't understand that a lot of what's happening to you is out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
It will happen to you whether you like it or not, because that's
Yes.
what you've chosen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's it's so interesting because as I dug in to try to figure out, okay, what is my human design? I did feel, as my midlife is shifting here, I did feel so like I was battling against something because it wasn't what I was, considered the norm. So I
Mm,
think that's a really important place to gain knowledge, to understand. And like you said, we've lost that connection with spirit, with our energetics, with the universe. We have really lost that connection
mm.
in today's society. So many of us are, disconnected from ourselves, from nature. And so I would love to talk more. I mean, I could probably talk about human design with you for like an hour and a half and no problem. But I would love, how did that, when you started to learn all these things, so you're in this space where you're now transitioning in your own life, there's all these things changing around you. Like you said, your new moon is bringing forth all these things. How did you, did it feel like you could lean into it? It felt okay, or were there parts where you were like, I don't know what's going on? Can you kind of share that with us?
I think where I was fortunate was that because I have been involved in that spiritual space for all of my life,
Mm,
I already had an underpinning understanding of the way the universe worked. I
yeah.
had learnt that so long ago.
Mm,
And I think because it was part of my life growing up, it's like any other faith-based sort of situation. Like I never doubted anything that I read or that someone said to me that was a medium, or if I
mm,
had a reading, I never doubted the information that was coming through.
yeah.
So I think I probably had an advantage from that perspective, in that I already understood all of that sort of information.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but where it came back to me was that, of course, then as you get older and you sort of get into life,
Hmm.
I had sort of let that consistent spiritual practice ebb away.
Mm,
So I think, and as I say to a lot of women, we don't hear ourselves anymore because of the noise that's around us.
yeah.
So because we're in a constant state of fixing
Yeah.
and keeping all those plates juggled in the air that
Mm,
we have to manage, and it is an expectation. I say so often when I'm speaking to people,
hmm.
there is just this expectation put across women
Yeah.
that we will do that. We will keep all those balls juggling in the air, and
Yes.
nobody stops to say, are you okay? Do you need to stop?
Yeah.
So we just take it all on.
Hmm.
And I think I took it all on,
Hmm.
and I was desperately trying to keep everything flowing
Mm,
and everyone thinking that everything was fine, which
hmm.
is what we do.
Yep.
And I think energetically, when I finally got to a time where the universe was going, enough, you're not
Mm,
hearing us, is
hmm.
when the noise starts to get even louder. And there'd been situations occur which were already making me stop and think, this, I've got to move from this. This is just not
Mm,
serving me anymore.
hmm.
And then I actually had somebody come across my space who then became my mentor. And she then brought me back into my practice, which is what I think I needed to do.
Mm,
And she was the one who basically said to me, you're not you're not doing what you need to be doing. This
hmm.
is not serving you. You should have left this long ago. And I think because I just had that inherent trust
Hmm.
of that information coming through, that it was actually my higher good telling me that. It was my spirit guides through her going, wake up,
Yeah.
that I just went, whoa, okay. And I deep dived right back into
Okay.
meditation and having a practice and journaling and allowing myself to re-listen to my intuition again,
Mm,
which changed everything, because then, because I was accepting and I was trusting the process, the process kind of just moved things out of my road
That is
and allowed
powerful.
me to, yeah, which is
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So that inner voice, oftentimes, I like to think that that's our confidence is that inner voice, that inner dialogue that is really looking out for our best and higher self. And so as you're stepping into this and you're listening more, you're paying attention more to what this inner voice is saying. And I love that you were just able to come back and be back in alignment and be like, no, that is correct. I am listening. This is what I need to do. For those that are maybe sitting there, they hear the inner voice, they're listening right now and they're like, yeah, yeah, I have that urge. I have that pull. I can hear my inner voice. But they're not able to listen, or maybe they're not in a mindset yet where they can just be like, I'm coming back to my practice. Do you have some tips or some advice for that woman? Is there something that she can start doing to become more confident in her little inner guide? Or what would you say to her?
I would say to, and not just a woman, I would say to anybody that
Mm-hmm.
is experiencing anything where it's causing them any form of noise,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a theory, and I talk about it a lot, that you have a comfort meter.
Mm.
And when you are not comfortable in whatever it is you're doing, experiencing, the people you're interacting with,
Yeah.
it goes from a space of, I just don't feel right here. I just don't like you. It goes from that very subtle sort of energy that you feel
Mm-hmm.
right up to the most loud of noises, in that, is your relationship so toxic that you cannot function? Is your workplace so toxic that you are now ringing in sick all the time? You're dreading having to get in the car to drive to work.
Mm.
You're taking all of your sick leave because you can't stand to be there. When that noise
Mm-hmm.
becomes so loud,
Yeah.
is where you've really got to stop and think about what's going on, because that noise is meant to be saying to you, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep making it louder and louder and louder until you realize you're going against the grain.
Yeah.
So I always try to say to people, think of it in that concept. Anything that you're experiencing that isn't just easy, joyful, coming to you naturally, everything's falling into place the way it should
Mm-hmm.
be, they're the things you need to stop and think about. Why?
Right.
Why is this not working for me? It's always
Mm.
for us, it's never
Right.
to us.
Yes.
Why is it not working for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to get really real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not an easy process. It
No.
took me, even from the time that I first met my mentor, and I started getting back into consistency, it still took me 6 or 7 years to make that
Mm-hmm.
decision to move on, because I had to be energetically ready. I had to prepare myself.
Right.
And it's a big space. Making
Mm-hmm.
big change is huge.
Yeah.
So I think the thing then is, first of all, to identify what's going on,
Mm.
and then just take really small steps to put just one boundary in place. Just find one thing and just go, I'm not going to allow that anymore.
Mm.
And it might be that you need to go and have a conversation with somebody around why you feel you're not being respected or honored or treated fairly, or it's not working for you, or it's too
Mm-hmm.
much. What can we do? And then you put the next boundary in place. But you usually find that once you come to the realization and you're able to sit down and think about it from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and you just decide, I'm just going to do this one thing today. And it might just be simply that I am going to take half an hour out of every day of my life and I'm going to go for a walk, and
Mm.
I'm not going to deal with anybody. That might
Yeah.
be where you start.
Yeah.
I'm going to just take 20 minutes every day to make a cup of tea and sit out on my veranda and just look and do
Mm.
nothing, just in my brain.
Yeah.
The minute you make those small little boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
it actually allows you to then move to the next boundary, because you've made a space to start
Mm.
hearing it.
Oh, I love
And
that.
And you
Yes.
just have to work through it one little bit at
Hmm.
a time,
Hmm.
and just in better practice. And a lot
Hmm.
of people will say, oh, but I can't meditate. Well, then just go for a walk.
Hmm.
Just sit and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Go and do a yoga class.
Yeah.
Do something that allows you to put your mind into nil
Yeah.
so you can hear yourself.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
really all you have to do. And then you
Hmm.
usually find that once you can get people doing that and they just take that first step forward,
Hmm.
there's like this big congratulatory universal thing where people go, yay.
Yeah.
And it starts, the momentum starts to build.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and everyone is so different. So
Hmm.
you have to work with everybody. And you probably know this as well. You have to meet everybody at where they're at.
Yes. Yeah.
Usually people do not come into your frame of reference, and it doesn't even always have to be a client.
Hmm.
Sometimes it can be a friend that I have this conversation with, or just some random person that you
Yeah.
happen to get into a conversation with because that's
Yes.
how it's meant to happen for them.
Yeah.
um, you just need to say to them, look, just start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to turn the noise down, and if you don't turn the
Hmm.
noise down, then you can't hear what the universe is trying to tell you and what your intuition is
Hmm.
trying to say to you.
Hmm. And I think it's really important that you touched on like the noise is so many different things, right? I think we think that the noise is always these like big, grandiose gestures that are, oh my God, my this is all falling apart, so now I got to move on to something else. But like you said, it could
Mm,
be something as simple as why am I calling into sick to work all the time? This workplace is toxic for me and I'm not realizing it, but my body is, and my body is getting sick every day because it doesn't
mm,
want to go there, right? And, or those little things where when you really start to set those boundaries and to take those quiet moments with yourself, you can start to see, oh, that's a little bit of a noise this that universe is trying to get my attention and say, hey, this over here, we shouldn't be doing that because this is not good for you, right? So
mm, mm.
I love that little reminder because I know a lot of the people that come into the programs and they're like, "Oh, but my life is okay. Like, I have an okay job and I have an okay relationship." And but that when we dig in, like you said, there's all these little indicators of no, that's not good. That's noisy. That is the universe going, "Hey, excuse me," right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and is okay the benchmark that you're aiming for?
exactly. Yeah.
You know,
Like if you're okay
everybody.
with being okay, that's great, but don't you,
That's it.
do you want to be great and awesome and feel
Mm,
fantastic? Yeah, so that's
yeah,
that's amazing. I love that. I love that little reminder. And I think it's so
and you
important. Hmm.
and you're right. Like you, a lot of people go, well, I'm looking for the noise, but the noise can start very, very quietly, and it can start with, why can't I sleep properly at night? Why am I crying all the time? Like it can
Yeah.
be very quiet and subtle at first. And
Yeah.
then the more you don't tune into that,
Hmm.
it turns into that extra layer all the time.
Yeah. And here we are, like most of the listeners here are in midlife. So we have those moments where we cry, where we don't know why we're crying, right? The hormones are also at play.
Mm,
But I fully believe, and a big part of, what I believe is that when you actually sit with it, there is energetics behind it. There is a
mm,
reason, when you're completely dysregulated in your nervous system and in your connection to self, that exacerbates how your human being is functioning. So it makes
that's
sense
right.
that, oh, my hormones are super out of whack, but I'm also completely dysregulated and unconnected to source completely, right? So I
Mm.
think all of this coming together is so vital. And I love this kind of conversation that we're having here. So when you're when you're in that space, it can feel overwhelming, right? Like it is overwhelming at times for us to try and figure out all the little things. You've given us some amazing little steps to take, like going for a walk. That is, anybody and everybody can do something small like that. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture of recreating your whole life
No.
to understand what's going on. So I honestly would love to keep going on all of this for hours on end. But I do want to wrap it up. I do want to make sure that we respect everyone's time here. But I think that, what you've shared here is so very powerful. And I think that, hearing that you were able to use the tools and now you're passing the tools forward to other people. Like you said, that's what it's about. Our lived experience is what we
Mm.
bring to that table. And I would love, if the listeners are here and they're thinking, okay, one, what is human design? Because this is fairly new. And what did you mean by my moon? My moon stuff, what is that? Or, a lot of people don't understand the whole birth chart, and it's a
Mm.
very, very complex thing. But if there's listeners here that are thinking, okay, this aligns and her story aligns, with me and I want to connect or I want to learn more, where should people come to find you and connect with you, and how can they work with you?
Well, you can just go to my website, which is michellewollaston.com. It's nice
Okay.
and simple.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those information will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've actually developed a resource which I it's something that I developed just so that when people hear me speak or they read one of my articles and you get that resonance of, oh, okay, I can
Mm-hmm.
kind of relate to what she's saying. Is
Mm-hmm.
this me? Because that's
Yeah.
usually when you have your, light bulb moment.
Yeah.
It's something that they can just go and download. It's complimentary and they can just work through it. And
Mm.
it's gives you some little exercises that allow you to start coming back to yourself and asking those reflective questions.
Mm.
So that will be available to anybody who wants it. But if you want to work with me, you can actually just book a connect call so that we have a chance to speak for 15, 20 minutes and see if we resonate with each other.
Okay.
I actually gather all that data before the call and I have a quick look at what your chart and your energies are saying so that I've got a feeling for why you're coming to
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
So they can do that. But I mean, if you're just curious, there are plenty of free calculator type tools available. If you just Google, my birth chart, that you can go and put your data in and it will give you a chart to look at and it will give you a stock standard general collective type reading as to what that indicates. You can
Mm.
do the same thing. You can ask particular sites to work out what your progress moon was when you were born. And
Okay.
then you really don't have to be any great maths genius. You can just count 3.5 years, 3.5 years, 3.5 years, and then Google what each moon phase means.
Yeah.
And the same with your human design. You can find human design websites, which will let you put your data in and it will
Mm-hmm.
tell you what you are. Um, they all have their own complexities. So unless you're schooled in it in some way, you're only going to get that general information that's put out there for the collective to read.
Yeah.
But at least it'll give you some idea of, okay, that sort of makes sense to me. If
Mm-hmm.
if you're not sure whether you want to deep dive into it further,
Yeah.
but if you come and deep dive in with me, then I do all that difficult analysis for you,
Mm-hmm.
and then just basically come back to you and go, well, okay, this is what it looks like energetically. And then usually I find that when the people start telling you the story, you can go, well, that's why that's happening because this is the energy at play, and you're now needing
Ah.
to do this to work with it rather than push against it.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Yeah, because I think a lot of people after this episode are gonna go Google all their things and they're gonna try and figure it out. But I do know, I know a bit about it, but when I started digging in, I was like, this is a lot.
It's
And
a rabbit
so
hole.
it's a whole bunch. So I really think that, if you're listening right now and you're Googling and you're trying to get all your information, it's good to gather it and to get that basic knowledge. But if you're ready to really dig in and to see, okay, where am I going with this? What is actually happening? I think heading to somebody like you who can actually transcribe what this all is, right, and make sense is really important. I'm a huge advocate of we don't need to do it all by ourselves all the time. So let's get the help when it's available. I want to say, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your heart. I really do think that this kind of episode kind of reminds us that we're not alone in this midlife.
Mm,
There's all these things happening, whether we feel like we're in a breakdown or a breakthrough. It's all part of the process. And I want to encourage, like I said, everyone that's listening, reach out to Michelle if you have questions. If something sparked in you
definitely.
today, yeah, she's got all the information for me, so it'll be in the show notes. So don't worry about trying to, search it out. Just go to the show notes. It'll be right there. Um, Definitely download that free resource if you're listening and grab, those little ways to dig deeper. That's such a great way to start. I really appreciate you bringing that for the listeners today, Michelle. And I would love, is there any last little tidbits that you would like to share before we close out here today?
Um, I think the really important thing to remember, regardless of what age you are and what's happening
Mm,
for you,
mm-hmm,
is to always remember that it's you're not broken.
mm,
All of this is to allow you to start to remember what it is you're meant to be doing.
mm,
So the energies at play are there to make you stop and think and remember yourself.
right.
So I just think the most important thing that any of us can do, just in a health and well-being perspective, is just stop
Mm-hmm,
and allow yourself time and put yourself first for just the smallest amount of time each day
mm-hmm,
to just hear you.
mm,
And, it might be in the 10 minutes in the car when you're driving back from school drop off or going to work, or just wherever you can find that time to just be on your own
yeah.
without any of the external noise,
Mm-hmm,
and then build in those moments. But always remember that it's nothing that cannot be fixed. Once you understand what you're working with and how
mm-hmm,
to have it work for you, it happens very, very quickly. Once
mm.
you can bring yourself into alignment, it's amazing how quickly you will start to manage it all in a very different way.
Mm, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I love, that we're not broken. So let's keep that in
No,
mind. Yeah, we're not. We're just
yeah,
becoming something even better, right? We're just,
that's it.
yeah. So I want to say again, thank you so much, Michelle, for being here
You're
with
welcome.
us. Really, really appreciate this conversation. And guys, make sure that you grab the show notes and grab her resources. So until next week, thank you everyone for being here, and we will see you again. Thank you for joining the conversation here with us again today. If something in this episode hit home, I want you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. That's how we can reach more women who need to hear these conversations. And if you haven't yet, come join the book club. It is free. You don't have to go through midlife alone, I promise. You can find everything you need at www.chaosclarityandconfidence.com. So take care of you, and I will see you next time.